All right, you are very welcome along to Off the Bull. Credit Ronan Mullen for that tagline. This is the show for the next 5 weeks where we're going to be watching The Last Dance, ESPN's brand new Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls documentary. Delighted to say that Ronan Mullen is with us, Kieran Donaghy is with us, and Jarlath Regan, you're welcome along to the basketball conversation. We might start with you, Jarlath. I think we're all huge fans immediately of The Last Dance so far. What do you think of last night's first 2 episodes?
Well, I was really ready to be disappointed. I was really, really ready because I've probably watched every kind of handmade version of this on YouTube. So for me, I was so pleasantly surprised to see how it's a really elegant, beautiful homage to, the Babe Ruth of basketball, and that it included the laying of the groundwork for something that could sustain over 10 episodes. I mean, that's the first thought. It's like, my wife was like, 10 hours of this, how are they going to manage that?
10 episodes is an incredibly long time. This is a bloody marathon when it comes to it. Even if you look back at some of the recent big undertakings from the likes of ESPN, and you think about OJ Made in America, this is on a whole other level. And you do wonder if it would have the legs, if it would have the narrative to be able to sustain it beyond the first couple of weeks. Kieran, I think it's pretty clear from the first 2 hours that this is going to be sustainable.
Oh yeah, I think I would have stayed on and watched the other 8, no doubt, which is always a good sign of a series. But look, there's so many fascinating characters in the story, and we spoke about this last week on we haven't even got to Rodman, and I know he's next week, but fascinating story with Jordan and Pippen, and how underpaid Pippen was, and the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson, and how it was all handled. And yeah, there's a great insight. You can even see, I'm even picking up bits of the footage, the way Jordan and Pippen and them kind of acting around Jerry Krause, and you could tell that there was no positive feeling towards him at all, and it was very much I'd say Phil Jackson almost used it as us against them type mentality as well. And look, it was brilliant, and it's it's got so many characters, and it will have by the time it finishes, but it's all based around that, as Mike Wilbon said, that ultimate sports alpha male who is Michael Jordan. And I think we got enough of Jordan and Pippen's story where we can now start to bring in the Steve Kerrs and the Rodmans and these guys, Ron Harpers, that played a huge role in that season. But it's great to see also from guys like, who played with Jordan when he was a rookie, etc. So you're getting that insight as well to because we wouldn't have heard much about Jordan's rookie year as in such. We knew how good he was, but you wouldn't see the interaction. So yeah, no, it was really good.
Ronan, that was pretty good to look at as well. I think you were texting me beforehand saying the soundtrack is amazing. Personally, I'm just a huge lover of any ESPN montage, especially when you've got all this brilliant footage from Jordan's college days.
Oh, and you know me, I'm a sucker for a montage. Eric B and Raheem straight out the gate, so I was golden there. But I don't know about you, it's kind of like Stranger Things. I don't know if you watch Stranger Things, but it makes you nostalgic for a time that you weren't really cognizant of. And for Jordan, obviously we were around, but I definitely wasn't aware of basketball on this level. I probably knew who Michael Jordan was before I knew what basketball was. So it's kind of like Muhammad Ali aside, this is kind of the era that I wish I had been around for to kind of experience. And the circumstances being that they are somewhat bizarre, but the whole world is once again 20 years later all focused on Michael Jordan. And it seems kind of fitting because the scale of this thing, it would have been a shame if it fell under the radar in any capacity, but the way things are, I think everyone's going to be tuning in, and it's a remarkable piece of work, and I'm glad it came together because, as it was revealed, there was a lot of pitching back and forth to get access for this footage for the final season because people knew it was sort of falling apart at the seams, and 20 years later it's finally come together. So I think it's a treat for everybody.
Yeah, imagine sitting on this gold mine for so long, 22 years of unbelievable footage. Just reading back some of the material, like Adam Silver talking about being head of entertainment and the persuasion that had to go into allowing the Bulls to bring cameras in the first time, and then the re-persuasion that had to happen over the last couple of years to allow Michael Jordan to do this thing and to persuade him to do so. It's mad really that somewhere in ESPN this thing was sitting there for so long, and you can just imagine the producers behind this salivating at the prospect, and it is finally here. And as you say correctly, Ronan, just this ability to be right in the spotlight now. It doesn't have the NBA Finals sort of playoffs to contend with. It has nothing in the world to contend with. It is right here.
Well, unsurprisingly, so 30 for 30 were given this footage when that series first started, and they obviously were salivating at the prospect of doing something with it. And as you said, for whatever reason, Jordan just wasn't that keen. Maybe the price point didn't get to where he wanted it to go. But there have been rumors in the last few days, and it'll be a surprise to no one, given how competitive he is, that when LeBron closed out that finals in 2016, and there was a little bit of talk about, is LeBron the greatest ever, that Jordan sort of pulled the trigger on it. And Mike Tolan was on the Ringers podcast last weekend, and he basically said that he had his meeting. Jordan was sort of on the fence, and once he found out that these are the same guys who made the Iverson documentary, that was a triumph in itself, obviously a lot shorter than this one, but when they saw
Let me ask you this question, lads, though. How much of that back and forth do you think resided in him not wanting to come across like a prick? Because I imagine, especially based on some of the comments that he's made since, and what we saw, even in the not hugging Scott Burrell in Paris, that we're going to see the darkness. We're going to see the dark side of this man. And I guess I did love him as a poster. But the more I learned of the man, the more I thought, I wouldn't like to be around this guy. But in the same way, Tony McCoy, greatest jump jockey ever to have lived, was an awful prick for years and only became the greatest through being a prick. The Eamon Dunphy, would he kill your granny? Jordan would have killed everyone's granny. And I imagine that the protection and the cocoon around the smiling, earringed, I want to be like Mike type character, and how that facade has been gently chipped away at, especially with that ESPN magazine piece some years ago. I wondered if what you guys thought about was the hesitancy around fully exploding that myth.
Well, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, Kieran, because like I would say that you would have been a massive Jordan fan and still are a huge Jordan fan. I think I certainly, like when you mentioned the old ESPN piece, for example, and the Sports Illustrated pieces that eventually stopped Michael Jordan from speaking to the magazine for a certain amount of time, I certainly came to Jordan with a 3D view. Like, I don't necessarily remember the up-and-coming Michael Jordan and him becoming my sporting hero, for example. So I'd be keen on your take on that, Kieran.
I don't think Jordan, I think Jordan came out recently and said, look, people aren't going to like me after this. And I think people that aren't going to like him probably aren't those that have been inside the inner sanctum of a dressing room or within a team or even a business that are trying to go somewhere and trying to be excellent and trying to achieve excellence. And you see very quickly from even Jordan's upbringing, from the dad, go back into your mom. You don't know what you're doing out here. Let Larry work with me. Go back in with your mom. You don't have a clue. Telling him he can't do something. That's the way Jordan was taught how to deal with things, from just a very idealistic point of view about how to deal with people. His dad was hard on him. So what happens? Jordan has a lot of affection for all these guys. He knows he needs them to win something, but he knows deep down that if they are to be great and what it takes to be great, they're going to need to be thick-skinned. They're going to be able to take stuff. And yeah, I don't think Jordan not releasing this documentary was about people not liking him. More so the fact that when the Warriors, and I know LeBron when he won that championship, but still LeBron only had 3 championships, I think, at that stage. And it's, I would say it was that Golden State Warriors team with Durant and Draymond Green and Curry and Klay Thompson, and they broke the Bulls' record, and they looked like they were going to be like this dynasty and this unbelievable team before Durant left. So it was around that time, I think, when David Silver approached Jordan again, or he was approached, and I think almost gave him the green light, just to let everybody know, yeah, they're good and they had a good story, but like nothing beats winning 3, retiring for 2 years, letting somebody else win for 2 years, and coming back winning 3 in a row. And who's to say? And I know there would have had to be in a rebuilding process, but who's to say? And who'd back against Jordan getting his team over the line, both in '94 and '95. So. Very possible to have 8 in a row, which would be obviously unmanageable. So I think for Jordan, I think it was more about kind of put this out here, lads. The time is gone now. The dust is settled. I'm my own. I really don't think Jordan's worried. Jordan doesn't have much interaction with the public, and his brand is so iconic and so built up by now that a few arguments or a fist fight with Steve Kerr, people say, "Oh, geez, that's bad." But again, when people say that's bad, they're people I don't think that necessarily were in a dressing room where you're trying to win. Because if you had the cameras around,
but that's the vast majority of people, right?
Yeah,
that's the vast majority of people.
It is. And but what I'd be trying to say to those people is, inside in the dressing room or outside in the pitch when you're training, you're fighting for a spot or you're fighting for a championship. Fellas come to blows and fellas go to fisticuffs or whatever happens. It's always seen as in the greater good. He's keeping him on his toes, and he called him out. He was right to call him out, and he has been doing that in the last few games. Whatever you need to nip them things in the bud. It's not like the world we live in now, where you can kind of say, I won't say it to him, I'll go away and I'll put it on the WhatsApp group later on. I think it's always more effective when you call the guy out straight away. And I think Jordan was obviously did that his whole career. His competitive edge was more than anybody that's ever played the game. And I don't think he was holding this because. And maybe you might be right, because maybe his brand is so big now. Maybe if they'd have released it in '98, his brand might have taken a hit. But I really don't think so at this stage.
That thing you say about Jordan telling us that you're not going to like us after this documentary, I think that is a badge of honor for Michael Jordan. He is really proud that you might actually come away from this thinking that this guy went to all sorts of level to be the competitive beast that he was. I don't think this is necessarily something that Michael Jordan would be saying, "Oh, I'm ashamed of how I've come across here." Like what we've seen in the first couple of episodes, him being a bit of a dick in training, teaching Luke Longley how to execute fairly basic defensive maneuvers, for example, shouting at his teammates. Like, this is a Jordan-approved documentary. Is this not all the stuff he wants us to see, to put forward the incredible competitor that he is?
Yeah, I suppose to some extent, yeah. But I think that that's taken years. And the incredible, it was nearly cartoonish, the image we were meant to have of him. That there was, I think the documentary shows us exactly how different sports were on so many levels through so many eras. From the cocaine traveling circus of the 1984, like that blew my mind out my ears when I first read about that. And then his account of that hotel team party where there was all sorts taking place. And from that point, him being an isolated figure, it really kind of it let us see once and for all that wasn't just a myth, that happened. He'd no part in it, but how different things are now. I remember reading in Blood on the Horns is the book that Roland Lazenby wrote about this season. And if people are looking for outside reading off the curriculum stuff, get that book. It's absolutely unbelievable. And it also details exactly what Scottie Pippen said to Jerry Krause when half pissed on the team bus. It also details how Jordan used to drink a six-pack after every game on that bus, literally down them one after the other. And it reveals exactly how much sports has changed in terms of the media intrusion and how you used to be able to cultivate an image that could be nearly cartoonish in its sheen of smile and sparkle. And nowadays, with the proliferation of cameras, tweets, phones, you just can't do that. You need a 360-degree view of your athlete. So if anything, I think you're right that he's probably trying to catch up with that 360-degree idea that he was human too.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like, I think the one that definitely, I think you mentioned Babe Ruth already here, Jarlath, and it's Michael Wilbon who brings that up as one of the talking heads early doors, describing him as the ultimate sports alpha male. I wonder if that's actually the ideal personification of how Jordan wants to be remembered. I don't know what you think. Like, it seems like not necessarily a complimentary thing to say about somebody anymore.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean about. I really don't care. I really don't think he's too worried that people are going to look at him in a negative light after this. And like Jarlath's right, like the sign of the times, Bird and Magic saved the NBA. The NBA before Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came along was a joke. It was. I don't know if you've seen the movie Semi-Pro, but that's what you're talking about. The lights went off and the commercials came on, and fellas started fighting each other. Drugs were everywhere, drink was everywhere. The league was seen in a very negative light. Predominantly black players playing, nobody, poor enough crowds going to games, and the Burden Magic phenomenon brought it into every day. I think the NBA finals weren't even shown live until Burden Magic came along to the finals. I think all NBA finals were shown like the following day. Like we got the documentary this morning instead of the boys in America last night. So I think Jordan was the next level up in that. So when Jordan comes in 84, Magic and Larry are only in since 79, 80 maybe. So they've only had 4 years. And it actually personifies how badly Scottie Pippen got caught financially. Because the league was at such a low ilk when he signed, like 90, he even signed that deal in 91 or 90. It just shows you that the league was still, the revenues and the jump up in pay was astronomical from 1987 to 1997. And I think them times were they were pre, as Jarlath said, they were pre-Twitter and pre-everything, and fellas could do really what they want. Nobody had cameras out. Once the paparazzi weren't in there, guys could do what they want. They could drink what they want. They could do, they could do anything. They were bulletproof. And much of society lived like that. If you looked at the George Best of that era, or these guys, even fellas could cut loose that bit more without the worry of being a constant role model or someone snapping a picture of you, falling around the place drunk or whatever. So I think back then they were left to their own devices once they were doing their job, and nothing personifies more that than Dennis Rodman. And this is 97. This isn't even 84. Rodman is over in Vegas, doing God knows what, and lands back for game 5 or game 6. No problem, boys. I was out till 5 o'clock in the morning. So
that's probably the thing I'm looking forward to most is the Rodman episode. I mean, if you see, like, I felt like Scottie Pippen is someone I've always felt was never given his due. And yeah, the Rodman thing is really, now I'm really like, well, the 30 for 30 about him was incredible itself, but how is this going to cover it? Like Jason Hare to me is the biggest winner out of this, because his, what he's created and the elegance with which he did it in painting the picture, like Kieran says, painting that picture of this league that was struggling. And also, lads, what did you make of how the impact, if you think about it, Michael Jordan only really came to Ireland in 1992. Like, he was in the league nearly 10 years at that point. But when the Dream Team arrived, everyone in Ireland knew who he was. But the impact within weeks, like, I thought it was incredible to see the empty stands in Chicago, a stadium, empty seats in games 1, 2, and 3. And by the third week, they're sold out for the season. Like, George Best is a really good comparison, because it electrified everyone he went to, everywhere he went. If you read the Phil Knight book, the impact that it had on Nike was they took all of their money and put the bet on him. Such was the absolute magnetism of his game, that they went and took every endorsement from every other basketball athlete and said, give it to him. What did you make of that as just the kind of meteorite hitting this sport? And in the space of a few weeks, he's one of the top players in the league.
It's so true, because you look at Chicago now, it's so easy to pigeonhole it as the city. You look at the slew of franchises they have, storied franchises, and presume that he just came in and sort of revived this ailing franchise. But it wasn't like a dormant volcano. It was a hole in the ground when he got there, basically. And as they hilariously pointed out, there was an indoor soccer team that was outselling the Bulls at the time. So I thought it just showed that he didn't just come in and sort of light the spark again. He basically built it from the ground up. And from a personal point of view, similarly, when he went to college, he wasn't the number one guy straight away. As in most instances, you have to start from scratch. And I presume elite sports people are so annoyed at the prospect, or the notion that this word talent, that they're just born with these natural gifts. Like, he had to work at it. And if it was nowadays, and you saw what happened with Garnett, and you saw what happened with Kobe, that like they were one and done, like straight out of high school, and also now in college, he basically play 1 year and you're gone. His second year at college was so fundamental to his development. It primed him to be the NBA star that he was. So I think he brought, like, as much as he wanted to show the impact he had in Chicago, he also wanted to show that this wasn't a fluke. Like, he had to work. As talented as he was, this was also a personal project.
And I think that's why he was so pissed off with Jerry Krause wanting to, to tear it all down and rebuild it up. And he's got this line where he wants a sense of respect for the people who laid the foundations for this organization to be successful. That they should have some say in how this plays out. And I think that's what his major beef was, as you rightly say. He went there and it was a hole in the ground. And by the time he finished, it was the greatest story in sport at the time. The Bulls, when Jordan finished after getting the second three-peat, I don't see how many more teams were more famous around the world than Chicago. And as you said, they were indoor soccer crowds having more people in the stands before that. So I think that's why it bears out that he's so negative towards Jerry on that aspect of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned the traveling cocaine circus, as it's mentioned at the start of Jordan's era, and how his allowance for the antics of Dennis Rodman almost represented a full circle of the behavior of NBA players off the court, and how Michael Jordan was the loner who railed against this entire culture at the start, and then ends up compromising for a guy. I'm not saying for 1 second here, by the way, that Dennis Rodman was on some sort of traveling cocaine circus, but I am saying that he was like going to Vegas in between games, that he was doing things that were not becoming of a professional athlete, I would say, at the time. But Michael Jordan
leading the league in rebounds, though. That's the difference.
That's the thing.
If the traveling cocaine team, the circus, were winning games, and let's not forget, he wasn't railing against anybody. He turned a blind eye and isolated himself and became a loner. He wasn't standing up and going, "I'm going to call out these drug fiends." He was fine with Rodman because he was absolutely, without a shadow of doubt, the greatest rebounder the game has ever seen. And he was producing. I would imagine that the second he didn't, he would have heard about it. And that would have been the centerpiece of this. The miraculous part in the Rodman story was the burning of the candle at both ends, the dragging of him out of nightclubs to show up at practice, get on a exercise bike to get warmed up and enter the game, still bleary-eyed from the night before.
It's going to be interesting. It's something that I hope we get to see in full glory next week when we get into the Rodman story. I just find it very interesting that is the bookending of Jordan's career, that there is something slightly comparable between those two situations. The other thing, I know it seems like an unbelievably obvious thing to say, but one thing that really kind of stuck out to me from this week's documentary is just how quickly this all happened for Jordan. Like, people talking about a matter of weeks between him kind of walking into the team and clearly becoming the best player on the team, him rocking up to the coach at UNC saying, "I'm going to be the GOAT," this sort of thing, and actually backing it up so quickly that his talent was so evident to people immediately. It was not a slow burn, because Jordan at that age was on an almost vertical trajectory. And I don't think I fully appreciated that at the time. It should be an obvious thing, but it was only really fully something that was hammered home after watching this last night, that there was a situation where Jordan went from somebody who rocked up to these teams to being a contender for one of the best players UNC had ever seen, to then quickly becoming one of the best players the Bulls franchise had ever seen, before it becomes obvious that the NBA is dealing with its greatest ever player. Like, that order of events is incredibly close together.
Yeah, I think he depicted it that way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Like, you have to consider that when he was in Laney High School, the growth spurt that he had, it was always going to take him a bit of a time to adapt. When you grow that much in basketball, when you grow that much as a basketballer, and something similar happened to me. I was the smallest player in the European Championships at 16, and I was playing midfield for the Kerry Miners a year and a half later at 6'4". So that growth spurt is similar, and it does take a while for your body and for you to actually get used to being 6'4" when you were used to being 5'10" or 5'11". And I think when Jordan went to UNC the first year, I think that game-winning shot, obviously, like, the confidence you get off of that. Them college games were the largest watched sporting events in the States at the time, the NCAA college final. And I think coming out into year two, like, it's where he really started, as you say, Owen, starting to tell people, look, I'm going to be the best. I want to be the best. I'm going to work harder than anybody else. And he did, and he perfected all of that. And, you know, he had the athletic ability, you know, he had the size, you know, in those early years, it's how long he's hanging in the air. I think we saw like 8 or 9 up and unders in that rookie season where he's just jumping from one side of the baseline where any mere mortal is trying to lay it up at the basket, whereas he's able to just hang there for that extra second. Everybody else lands and he comes up the other side and spins it in off the glass. His athletic ability and his complete desire to be great and to be brilliant is what kind of catapulted, I think, that growth spurt. The growth spurt catapulted that for him, I would say. And you know, if Michael Jordan stays 5'10" forever, we never hear from him. That's probably the facts of it. But being able to get to 6'4", 6'5", and then get in with Dean Smith, and as you say, get a great education. And some people that annoy me with the stats in the NBA and is Jordan the best? And they forget Jordan spent those years in college. They forget he took 2 years out in the prime of his career. They forget that he retired again after the last dance. And he could have certainly played another few years getting 30 points a game. So it is that always pees me off a bit. But I think what you're talking about, Owen, is that growth spurt that he had in later on in his high school days set him up for the college story. Had a great final year in high school and set him up for North Carolina. And obviously after the tryouts, they knew they had their guy. But I would say his development as a player, we often forget that in the GA. You know, a guy is a minor, or if he's not a minor, oftentimes fellas never get to see the light of day again, where it shows you that you actually develop more probably between 17 and 20 than you do between 14 and 17. And certainly that second period of growth for Michael Jordan as a basketball player between the age of 17, 18 and 20 years of age, he was ready to go, and he was ready to come in and do what kind of surprised you a bit last night when we were watching it, was come in and be the man. And you saw no more of that than against the Milwaukee Bucks when they were down 9 in that third game, and he was just cut loose and ended up winning them the game. And I think the veterans are saying, geez, this rookie won't let us lose a game this year. Do you know what I mean? So that growth spurt for me is fascinating from them 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and then almost one of the lines when he comes into the NBA is that he's not going to carry a team in the NBA because he's not 7 feet tall. And that kind of speaks to where the league was at the moment and how basketball is played.
Yeah, I think that that whole 7 foot thing makes the Rockets and the Trailblazers 2 of the biggest losers from these first 2 episodes, because still to look back and go, yeah, they wanted to travel.
Elijah One was the man, really, though. Like Elijah One was probably always number one.
Yeah, true. I mean, Elijah One does go on to be a Hall of Famer and an MVP. But there's definitely got to be someone in there.
It was the Sambui trade, and like can you imagine if Portland got Jordan then, and you could have played Drexler like Drexler was 6'7", 6'6". You could have played Drexler like a Scottie Pippen type, and Jordan would have came in and moved Drexler up to the small forward, but that would have been an unbelievable dynamic. And who knows what would have happened after that if Jordan did go to Portland that time. But I know they needed a big guy, and they went with Sambui, who was 7'2", and as you rightly said, you even hear Larry Bird talking about it, I think in episode 2, about we'd Robert Parrish, we'd Bill Walton, we'd Kevin McHale, and we had myself.
Dennis Johnson.
Yeah, but they had 5 or 6
massive
guys
lads
that were like 7 foot, 6'11". Larry Bird was 6'9". So that was their front court. But obviously height was the game was played much more walk it down. It's totally different today. The big man's gone out of the game completely today, but back then a big man was everything. Which is why the Bulls got lucky and got Jordan at 3.
So Reinsdorf for me, right? Jerry Reinsdorf comes off as like a really honest man in this, and very much like, there's a 10% chance. Oh God, we couldn't have Michael taking that risk. I think he's really, really been got off lightly here, and maybe in the subsequent episodes we're going to learn more, because Reinsdorf, let's face it, he could have fired Krause. I mean, if Krause is causing all these problems, you're in charge. Fire the guy who everybody hates. And the biggest storyline and the biggest plot arc that I'd imagine is going to run is this Krause thing, this Jerry Krause, or Crumbs as they used to call him, and the kind of initiation of bullying or workplace bullying by Michael Jordan on this man. And we saw it a couple of times in the comments about his height. I know of way more of this stuff from reading these books where the abuse that he used to get on the bus was that the bus used to go a lot faster before you got on the bus, Jerry. Like, comments constantly, never missing an opportunity to take a dig. And, you know, I mean, Kieran, you know as well as anybody, there's whipping boys in every locker room. There's always someone who kind of likes to play a bit of the clown and doesn't mind soaking up some of the flack. But this wasn't that. This was actual, as we could see, even in the first 2 episodes. There was hatred that boiled over to the point where Scottie abuses him on the bus. And Phil Jackson, Jerry Krause's maybe biggest opponent, steps in and says, that's too far. Have you, am I the only one who saw this as like the kind of central pillar of the whole story?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to become a huge thing as well. Like, it's interesting what you say about Reinsdorf, that he got off interesting. I have that as a loser from this episode, and I think that the Jordan headache analogy just sticks a pin in Jerry Reinsdorf immediately in the center of episode 2 here, that you kind of do see him wandering along, getting away with a little bit of murder, I think it's fair to say, as a talking head in this. I just think the headache analogy, the whole how bad is the effing headache line for Michael Jordan when he's replicating this conversation is something that kind of kills him in the middle of this. But the Krause...
I didn't think Michael got the analogy there, just for a sec. I don't think Michael got the analogy because, you know, the analogy was a headache, right? But how bad is the headache? The headache is the end of your career. That's how bad the headache is. And, you know, Reinsdorf on the one hand there looked to me like he was taking care of his player and his franchise, because let's not forget Sam Bowie did sustain a similar leg break that simply wouldn't repair because he went back playing on it too soon, and like that was the killer for me. It was like, Jordan did go back playing on it too soon. Like, he could have ended his career. He snuck off to North Carolina and played without permission. Like, I was like, oh my God, this is the smartest athlete of all time. Like, you fucking idiot. You could have blown everything by just being too thick-headed as to take the time off.
And it's interesting when you kind of put that in along with the thread of him describing Scottie Pippen as selfish then over the course of delaying his surgery in that summer. It's interesting. Like, I would definitely have been on the other end of that fence, Jarlath, in that argument, as in Jordan came out on top in that analogy. Now, of course, if I'm the person with the career on the line, am I saying, yeah, I'm going to take the 10% chance? Of course I'm not, because it's my career. But we're sitting here a couple of decades later and we're like, oh, beautiful theatre, amazing. That it is, after the fact, it is the beauty of hindsight that I'm able to sit here and say, well, Jordan killed Jerry Reinsdorf in that particular exchange, because, of course, if it had gone the other way, we'd be reading a documentary or reading a book or watching a documentary about how Jerry Reinsdorf warned Michael Jordan, the greatest prospect in the NBA, that his career could have been over.
True. I don't know what you guys took away from Krause not appearing. That was one standout for me, was that Krause he didn't submit to an interview for this, which is something that I think is kind of glaringly missing from this, because he's just going to get pounded over and over and over again as the thing goes on, as the guy that destroyed the Bulls. I wonder, is there any prospect for him appearing as a sympathetic character, or is it just as they've presented in episodes 1 and 2, that this man had a small man complex and couldn't get out of his own way, couldn't get out of his own ego, and couldn't get away from this idea that, hey, I had a big part to play in getting these championships. Organizations win championships, not players alone, which is the word that he was missing. I don't think that changes it too much. If I could talk to Jerry now, I don't think that word changes it too much, because your organization hasn't won a championship since. If you're claiming it's the organization that wins championships, not players alone, well, you're crummy at that as well. What did you think about him not appearing?
I don't think it was good that he didn't appear, but I come back at you a small bit on a few of them things. Look, Jerry Krause, he tore the mountain down in the end, but he did build up 2 of them. two squads, and he did make moves. Like, he made moves for players, and he took chances on players, and most of them worked. And I would say a lot of the footage where we're seeing kind of the bullying by almost Scottie and Jordan is at the stage where he's already told them that Phil, they already know Phil's last year. Scottie was obviously having issues with what contract he was on, how much money he was. He wanted to get more. He wanted to be healthy to get more. And Jordan wanted to win. And they were sick of Jerry at that stage, but he is the guy that put the pieces in place around Jordan. So, but I think it just went very sour at the end. And if you think of Jerry Krause in 97 and someone says, well, look, we're doing a documentary and all this, will you be a part of it? You can see him in 97 kind of saying, no, lads, I'm all right, I'll leave you at it. Because, it's probably a no-win situation. He knows Phil's going to be going after him. He knows Jordan's going to be going after him. He knows Scottie's going to be going after him. It's probably a no-win situation.
And he lost. Like, he did lose, Kieran. Like, he doesn't get to go, oh, but, we wouldn't have won that championship in 2006 and 2007 if I hadn't made that decision. He doesn't have any silverware to prove that he was right to do this. And the whole...
But he did it in the middle. Like, he did it in the middle as well. So, like, they had the first 3 championships. Jordan retired. Scottie was left there by himself. And like in the space of 18 months, them 2 rosters are completely different. There's very few, it's a complete haul over, and they win 3 in a row again. So in Jerry's little small man complex world, he was probably going, yeah, good luck, Scottie. I'm going to get in some, new guy in off the bat that's going to be as good as you, and we're going to pay him less, and we don't have to pay you this big max contract. You can go off somewhere else and get that. No, we're after bleeding you for 6 years on 18 million, and you've won 6 championships. You couldn't actually strike a better deal. So in his head, that's probably what he's thinking. And when you say Jerry Reinsdorf should have fired him, Jerry's probably sitting back there going, hold on, no, a minute, this guy's rebuilt the squad. He built 1 squad, we won 3. Jordan retired, he had to rebuild it all again, we won 3 more. These guys are all a bit older, we're going to have to rebuild. Who else are you going to look for to rebuild your squad other than Jerry at that moment in time? Nobody. Yeah, of course it didn't work out, but how many franchises in the NBA does it not work out for? You're taking a shot often now on an 18 and 19-year-old. If you're getting a low pick draft, it's often these one and done guys or guys that are coming straight from high school. It's very rare a fella that's played 4 years of college is going to go in the top 10. So you're taking a chance on kids who've never got any. Right?
Here's the other thing. In New York right now, James Dolan is the example of someone that no one wants to play for.
Yeah.
I mean, Krause had done so much damage to player relations through his behavior and Reinsdorf's behavior together, that they were essentially the Knicks by the time this was done. No one was going, for various reasons as well. Obviously, nobody wanted to fill Mike's shoes and knew that the city was basically in mourning for the next 5 years. But Dolan is a good example of a GM who, Kevin Durant going to the Brooklyn Nets along with Kyrie Irving was proof that you can, through your poor relations with players, make it impossible for you to get new ones. I guess I know it's fanciful for me to say he could have just fired him, but I just felt like Reinsdorf didn't own up to his own involvement in these things. Like, if I sign a contract with a player, I don't want to hear from you until the end of the contract. Bullshit. You are in an unbelievable situation here, and you have maybe the greatest 2 of a 1-2 punch ever to play the game. You've paid him peanuts and agreed a 7-year deal that you advised him not to sign. Just renegotiate the contract. Just have him in. Have all that Scottie stuff, all the ankle stuff, his creation. 100% his creation, by not throwing the arm around him and going, you're special and we love you. Here's your new contract. Like, it would happen now. Like, we know that. We know that a player like Fred VanVleet, an undrafted player for Toronto, can have an amazing NBA Finals and then go, I think we need to take another look at that contract of yours so that nobody else gets you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's an interesting one. Like when we're getting into winners and losers here, there's no question that Jerry Krause is going down as a loser after the first 2 episodes of this. Like no question about it. I think the obvious point to make about Jerry Krause is that he's obviously not around to defend himself, and that is the main thing. Like obviously they would have started this years and years ago, and they have some archive interview, and still. It kind of feels like I'm not sure. Are you familiar with that scene in Game of Thrones when everybody turns on Jon Snow and ends up stabbing him a million times? That's kind of how this feels on Jerry Krause over the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance. It is brutal. It is people piling in on him, but there is probably a lot of truth in what is said. That being said, like there is talk about what's the exact line? It's magic when he says Michael Jordan needed to ride horses with him. And like you only get the right horses with you if you've got a decent GM. And I think if you wanted to look for some sort of redeeming quality for Krause in these first 2 episodes, it's that he is the victim of bullying. Like that is always a way of creating some sort of sympathy with the audience. Like you want to do some layups, Jerry? We got to lower the rim. That's what Michael Jordan says at the end of episode 1. As a vertically challenged guy myself, I felt for Jerry at that moment as well, and I was like, poor guy, that you could target someone's height like that. For me, he's like absolutely stone cold loser from the first 2 episodes. Unfortunately, it's probably brutal at times, but I accept that the dissolution at the end is probably his fault.
Yeah, the French lad who didn't get the autograph.
Yes,
I'm not sticking up for bullies for 1 second, but you know, I think Jordan and Pippen come by 97, 98 season would have thrown Jerry Krause off the bus if they could have got a chance on a highway. So you know, I think that level of what we saw in the documentary, I'm not sure that went on for the 8 or 9 years that or the 10 years at that stage. Sure. That Jordan was there, more 13, but you know, I think at that stage, I think Pippen could have choked him physically in front of everybody, and obviously Jordan didn't like what he was doing. And then you're telling the greatest coach of all time, I don't care if you win 82 games this year, you're not being re-signed next year.
That's the one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy because like ultimately, from a ownership point of view, it came down to, you know, Krause or Jackson in the end. And
yeah,
Krause basically decided that the only non-drag and drop element of the whole Bulls project was Michael Jordan. But he also knew that if Phil Jackson wasn't there, Michael Jordan was going to be there. So for whatever reason, I think basically to keep Michael Jordan in the building, they had to make whatever decision was necessary. And letting Phil Jackson go was crazy. And in terms of the winners and losers, Phil Jackson, I think the edit has been quite sparing on him so far. I'm sure there will be an in-depth episode with him. But he just comes across as, we haven't got much insight into his coaching yet, and I'm not sure whether there will be that much in the documentary, but his facilitating qualities are there for all to see. Like when the Scottie Pippen thing is put to him, that, were you mad that Scottie did his surgery at the start of the season? He said no, basically saying, I'm going to be glad to have him at the end of the season. So he had so many of these things to deal with. Rodman, we've touched on, the Jordan in the background management fracas, and then the Pippen contract wrangle. Like Jackson had all these things on his plate, and he just managed to keep the plate spinning in the air. So I think he's come across as a big winner so far.
Yes, I think so. Have that down here. Because he backs Pippen, he goes down as a winner straight away. And let's talk about Scottie Pippen, lads. Winner or loser from the first 2 episodes? I think this is very much up for debate.
He's a complicated man. He's a complicated guy. And I really loved hearing about his upbringing, about the 2 paraplegics in his family and the stroke of his father, the fact that he was the equipment manager at his junior college, the fact that he grew those inches and took over and blew up. It made more sense of the decisions that Scottie made in his career that made me scratch my head. And when people slagged me for wearing his jersey, it made more sense. This is a fella who had a very, very tough road in life, had survived, thrived, conquered against all the odds, and really become an unbelievable basketball player. Like, it's not stated enough, and Mike said it as well. It's just not said enough. When he left, you know, they nearly went to the finals with Scottie leading the team. He led the team in every category. He was a freak in himself, and obviously when you're sparring with Muhammad Ali every day, you're going to improve. But he took that opportunity. He did improve. You know, we learned so much about him And like you say, there's light and shade here, because that decision not to take the court when the play is called for Tony Kukoc, it's not covered in the documentary. Play is called for Tony Kukoc in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1994, the year Jordan was out. He refused to take the court, which, as Kieran would tell you, that's as sacrilegious as taking Mike out of the game with 9 seconds to go in the game on the line. And, you know, we're all human. And he made that decision, and I could never understand it. But having heard all this, I could kind of understand why his emotions boiled over when it came to, I'm just trying to take care of my family. I'm just trying to look after my people, and I've worked hard and I deserve this. What did you think, lads?
Keen to hear your take. I'm personally of the view here that Pippen was a loser from this episode. Not that I think that that's the case. I think in general, I think that he was painted as such. One of the last things we hear is Michael Jordan describing Scottie Pippen as selfish. That is one of the last things we hear in episode 2. That is very much, for me, the full stop on the Pippen conversation in this story seen through Michael Jordan's eyes. So I certainly have him down as somebody who lost out.
I don't know. I find him a very captivating speaker, first and foremost. I always think he's very illuminating whenever he hits comments, even when he's trying not to give anything away about the behind the scenes. He always seems to in interviews down the years. So I like that. And also, to Kieran's point on Jordan earlier, like, that growth spurt was very interesting. So he had the ball handling of a smaller player and then grew 5 or 6 inches, and all of a sudden was this big man with a great touch. So I thought that was interesting as well. And ultimately, the contract wrangle I didn't have a problem with. To what Jarlath was saying, that he had to look after his family, that's totally fair enough. And I always got the impression he never had a chip on his shoulder about his status in the building, like with the starting 5 or the Bulls or anything like that. It was about his status in the league, where he sees these guys far inferior to him on losing teams or unsuccessful teams, and like 121 players are better paid than him, and he's just thinking, at a certain point, ultimately 7 years, he was like, nah, that's not good enough. So I thought it was totally fair enough. He obviously could have gone about it a better way. I kind of laughed to myself at the notion that he got surgery before the season started. I think that was a bold move, but I think, as Jarlath said, there's shade to it, and I think people can fall down on either side for this one.
Well, Larsa Pippen, his ex-wife, has come out over the course of the last few hours and said, thanks for your concern. Scottie did okay. Career earnings, $109 million from Bleacher Report was a screenshot. She posted 31th ranked in all-time NBA. And it's really interesting that you actually mentioned that, Ronan, in terms of his view of himself within the wider league. I wonder if he was more comfortable just by his nature with not being the number one star in a team as well. Just that footage we have of Charles Oakley. Does he have him in a headlock or something, saying you're the new kid in class or whatever? Yes. Like, imagine Oakley trying to do that to Michael Jordan. Like, he probably accepted on his first day, but deep down would not take it whatsoever. Whereas it seems Pippen's actually kind of okay with this. He's okay with earning his stripes. Obviously comes from a big family. He's okay with the order in the dressing room. And by extension of that, was happy enough to be second fiddle to Michael Jordan. Now, of course, that sort of any sort of line of logic along that is just completely blown out of the water by the fact that Jordan is the greatest player of all time. So maybe that's why he fell into a happy state as his number 2, I guess.
Yeah, and it's so easy.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
It's so easy for Pippen to be denoted as the punchline, and he often is. But like, as Jarlath said, when Jordan wasn't there, he did pretty okay. And then Jordan, as brilliant as he was, and it was shown in that other unbelievable montage from the Celtics game, like, Jordan struggled in the playoffs in terms of getting progression in the playoffs until Pippen came along. And it wasn't until, like, there's great trouble with the Pistons, which I'm hoping will be covered in this documentary. But like, it wasn't until Pippen sort of hit his stride, and even the pre-prime Pippen and the prime Pippen, it was only in those years that the motor really started moving and the Bulls started racking up championships.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple of other things to box off here in our winners.
Just
Sorry, go on, Kieran.
On Scottie, like, one of the best defensive players to ever play the game. And of course he was great at rebounds and assists and scoring as well, obviously. But you had Jordan and Pippen as your 2 and 3, and they were never blessed with great centers. He'd Luke Longley, he'd Wennington, he'd Bill Cartwright. He was never blessed with great scoring power forwards. Grant could average double figures, but Rodman obviously didn't. they were, you know, his hard-nosed defense, Scottie's defense is what endured him, I would say, especially to Jordan. And I don't think he'd the all-around game to fully carry a team to a championship, and nobody does by themselves. It's all about the second best player and the third best player of all these championship teams, and we even see that to this day. But I think as a number 2, I think it suited his personality. I think it suited his demeanor. I don't think he'd want to be Michael Jordan around the place. He strikes me as the guy from Arkansas, nice and quiet, country boy, do things right. And I think he was grand suited to being the second fiddle behind, as you rightly said, the best player of all time. And let him be the guy that is just plagued everywhere he goes. And Scottie, still on a winning team. He's still winning championships. And like we're talking about his contract, and he was underpaid, but still 18 million to his family, in 1991 is, and I can totally tell why he signed that, because you do hear of guys all the time getting injured or picking up a bad injury and they never play again. Whereas he wanted just to make sure that income was in there. So I don't pick him out as a loser out of this series, out of these first 2 episodes. But I just think, like, as a defensive hawk, I just know the length of him. Like, if he was on me in a game, you couldn't even get a shot off. You wouldn't be able to get a dribble off. This guy would be scalded all over you. And I think the main reason that a lot of people miss why they won these championships is Scottie and Michael defensively. For those 6 years, there was no 2 and 3 beating them. So it had to be your point guard or your centre from there, really, because the 4 was solid with Rodman and Grant. So I think them 2 as a defensive unit is possibly the best 1-2 punch of all time defensively.
Yeah, we're surely going to see the 2 of them double teaming Kukoc in 1992 in the next couple of episodes. That's going to be quite something to see. So I accept defeat on that one. I think you're all going for Pippen as a winner from that episode. I have him down as a loser. Just a couple of other things just to kind of go through. Is Michael Jordan a winner or loser from these first 2 episodes? Like, I think when you've got a couple of interviews being done with yourself, and you've got a nice glass of whiskey fluctuating in level throughout, and a cigar puffing smoke away, you're probably a winner.
He's the greatest winner of all time. Like, end of story.
There's no possible. Wait, hold on a minute. What about Michael Jordan, the fashion icon? Is that a winner or loser from this? The beret in Paris, is that a plus point or a negative point?
He's the coolest man on the planet.
He was selling his shoes in Paris. He'd wear whatever they want. If he was in Scotland, he would have wore a kilt. He's joking me. He's going to Paris, the fashion capital of the world. He was making sure that he was doing whatever. He was doing whatever he could to sell more sneakers.
Yeah, I actually thought it was a backwards flat cap for years that he wore there, but it was actually a beret. Yeah. I thought it was one of those kind of Samuel L. Jackson efforts, but no, it was actually the beret. What I'm really dying to say, I do think he's a winner in it, but and I do think they had to set him up in these first 2 as, look at this rocket of pure talent, hard work, aggression, and determination, so that the twists and turns that follow, we'll be ready for that, and we can come back to this, because look, there's some dark stuff coming. Like, if people are wondering where this goes from here, there's some really dark stuff on the way, including abuse of teammates, and including the gambling, and also these.
Are you calling him punching a teammate abuse?
Yeah, well, the punch on Steve Kerr is meant to be pretty legendary, that he laid him out as good.
He's not the only fella he punched in training, I can tell you.
Yeah. Have you ever punched anyone in training here?
I have, and so has most other fellas that are that are trying to win something. You have to have that competitive edge. You have to have that, and you never wanted to get there, and people feel uncomfortable when it happens, but it's really happening for a reason. Like, it was very rarely a physical altercation. It would be more an argument that would lead to a physical altercation about something that we're trying to do to win a game. And I'm trying to get my point of view across, and you don't agree with me. Or I want you to do something and you don't want to do something. But Jesus Christ, myself and Manny used to be like 2 billy goats around the training session. We fell out.
Second question, let me follow up then. Did you ever do it at basketball training?
I did. I got headbutted in the basketball training session one day for going too far. So trust me, lads, this stuff is not I really don't want people to see Jordan.
I just thought there was a different code of ethics to GAA and basketball, because I would think that, yeah, like in rugby, there's going to be a certain level of physicality needed. But in basketball, the fact that elbows get thrown and all the rest and everybody gets catches. Yeah. But I can't believe you got headbutted. So you were the person that got headbutted for taking it for talking.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
We'll leave that off. But it goes. That's the way sport goes. Fellas are going at it, and this is my own teammate. So this was a guy at training. And this is what I'm trying to get across about training, is that it gets so amped, and this was a year we won the national championship in Ireland. So it wasn't like we were bottom of the table and everybody was just throwing their ties out of the Prem. We were being competitive and we wanted to be the best. And when you're going at it at that, and you're like, of course, rugby is the absolute probably peak physical game in the world, where it's like you might as well be going into war as going into it, because what you have to deal with physically on it. But basketball, you're down there, there's elbows flying, there's trash talk happening, there's digs, there's bad belts when you go to the basket, there's sneaky things going on, and then there's obviously the trash talk to hype it up. And then there's often, you're in a setting where crowds are on your back, they're really close to you, they're able to get in your ear, the court is only 94 feet long, so people are kind of really getting to the max on what can they hold their nerve for. And Jordan didn't go into that training session and say, I'm going to punch Steve Kerr today and I'll teach him a lesson. That was something that got there, and I don't know how it got there, and I'm sure we're going to see it, which is the exciting thing about this documentary. But in sport and in great teams, there's always fights, there's always arguments, there's always fellas going at it, and what happens with the great teams and the teams that go on and win is they go home and they sort it out, and they come back better. They have a better understanding of what the argument was about, who was right, who was wrong, and they push on. I remember leaving. I was at a Tralee Tigers, and you're talking about getting my education. I was at a Tralee Tigers basketball session when I was about 14, and the two best friends that lived together were Vinnie Murphy and Roscoe Patterson. Roscoe Patterson was from Boston, great player. Vinnie was originally from Kanturk, playing in Tralee. The two boys were at it. Best friends. They drove to training. I was at every training watching them, and they used to get out of the car, and I'd be there saying hello to them, and I'd walk out with them afterwards. They get into the car and go home, and my mum would collect me. This one night, they tore the heads off each other around the court. Roscoe, a 6'5" black guy, punching Vinny, and Vinny giving as much as he could get back, and it was heated. And the following Thursday, I went up to Vinny. I was 14. I said, "Is everything okay?" He was like, "Will you stop? We were playing Uno that night till about 3 o'clock in the morning." It was all sorted. So yeah, like it's teams that can get over that kind of stuff will be successful, and it's fellas that hang on to that kind of a bitterness towards the person that was trying to challenge them. And some people can't take it. I'm sure there's going to be lots of guys in this documentary that we'll see couldn't actually perform playing with Jordan. He'd be a bit like Roy Keane in that manner. He's so demanding of you, so in your face, and some people just can't respond to it. But the people that want to respond, and the people that want to get better, and the teams that want to get better will go along with it. And they'll challenge Jordan, and rightly so. He needs to be challenged too. He can't be the only guy challenging everybody. And I'm sure fellas did challenge him. But when you're as good as he was, and you're as smart as he was, and you're as competitive as he was, he can't let something go if it thinks it's going to affect him winning a game. He's going to have to call you out on it. And that's what all the greats in every sport, that's exactly the way they're built. It's the way Kobe Bryant was built. It's the way Roy Keane was built. They're going to challenge you. They're going to call you out and shit that you're not doing to help me win a game. And if that's selfish, I'll take it. But that's the way it has to be. And I think that's the way Jordan seems to kind of will come across, and it'll probably get worse at stages going down the line. But I think people will always have to revert their mind frames back. People that haven't been in a high pressure situation or haven't been a part of a very successful winning team will have to try, and that's why I'm talking like this. So for those people that haven't been there, kind of go, okay, well, yeah, maybe he's got a bit of truth in that, rather than looking at this and going, oh my God, Jordan was a prick. He punched this little white guy called Steve Kerr. There's more to it than that.
Before we wrap, Jarlath, did you crack out a fresh pair of Air Jordans for watching the documentary earlier?
Like, I don't know, sometimes, right, I get really like disillusioned with the commercialism and the materialism behind the whole thing. I know this isn't the answer you wanted. You wanted me to say, yeah, these ones, right? But like, there is another aspect to this, which is just how much the wealth and the attainment of things and materialism went hand in hand with all of this, and how it kind of built a consumerist ideal around achieving in sports and excellence for young people that we see now actualized in our culture and society, whereas Phil was the spirit and was that metaphysical notion of the wheel and the parts within it and all the spokes being important for the wheel to turn, that he kind of took it up to a higher place that I now am much more interested in. And a lot of all of that stuff and the silly amount of Bulls memorabilia that I own now, I kind of look at it like, what was I doing? Like a lot of the
Really?
Bull stuff that I own I realize now because my parents, my family couldn't afford it, and it was a sign that I was doing well if I could have the thing that I wasn't allowed to have when I was younger, and I kind of understand it that way now. But that said, I got dressed in a full Bulls uniform and went down and played the music and announced myself into the
room. Listen, it's been a pleasure, lad. It's been a pleasure watching this documentary. Ronan, we might leave the last word to you. What are you expecting to see next week? What are you hoping to see next week in episodes 3 and 4?
Well, just more of the same. Like, I don't think they need to ram it home because there's a 10-part documentary, so that kind of explains it. But like some of the way the people were talking about Jordan, Larry Bird said that wasn't a basketball player, that was God dressed as Michael Jordan. bigger than the Pope, closest thing to God on earth. So more of that kind of stuff, more of that hyperbole. Yeah. I'm all for that. And a bit of Phil Jackson as well. Like we mentioned earlier that it was kind of little bits here and there, but I think it'd be nice to get a bit more in depth because he's as interesting a part of this story as anybody.
I love the confidence of Jordan when he's playing golf with Danny Ainge that day, and one, to be playing with Danny Ainge, and then two, to tell DJ lace up his boots tomorrow. I'm going to give him some numbers, and he goes out and gets 63 points. And a story like that, he walked into the Atlanta Hawks dressing room in his suit one day. They were all getting ready to get tagged out for a big game, and he walked into the dressing room. He looked around at all of them. They're all like, "What are you doing in our dressing room? Man, you're in the wrong dressing room. Get out!" And he looked down at Dominique Wilkins, who was a massive player at the time and very famous, one of the best dunkers of all time. And he said to Dominique, "Lace him up good tonight because I'm going to give it to you tonight." And he's 51, And as Dominique kind of was saying when he was telling the story, it was like, one, to have the balls to come in and say that, to let us know that he's going to give us numbers. So then we'd all say in the dressing room, well, there's one thing that's going to happen tonight now, lads. Jordan is not getting big numbers. But this Jordan still goes out and gets 51, even warning the team. Normally you'd be saying, "Oh, well, I'm sick today and I don't feel great, and then now I'm going to get 51." But to go into the dressing room, look at all the guys in the eyes, look at their marquee player and say, "Lace him up good, Dominique. I'm coming after you tonight." And he goes, gets 51. The guy was from another planet. He's not human. He's not human.
Yeah, I think...
and he is the greatest of all time, and I'm going to say that at the end of every show for the next 5 weeks.
Well, if there's one thing that the next couple of weeks is going to do, it's going to hammer home that opinion, and all the LeBron or Kobe believers are going to be ground down. Just like you mentioned Danny Ainge there, just one final thing for me is that montage of the 63-point game. I loved that so much. It's so simple, but like I think it was LL Cool J was the soundtrack on that particular montage. It was just so perfect. Like, I know it's simple, and the hard part is getting the good stuff out of the interviewees, but nothing beats an ESPN montage on a documentary like this. It is the beating heart of these series. I loved it so much. Lads, it's been great chatting to you. Hopefully we'll do it same time next week. Jarlath, Kieran, Ronan, this has been Off the Bull. Same time next week. Good luck for now.